I knew it was going to be one of those days when I walked into the teacher's lounge and saw Principal Dawson rubbing his temples like a man who had just discovered his car had been towed. That was never a good sign. "Morning," I said, dumping my bag onto the nearest chair and making a beeline for the coffee pot. It was still warm, small mercies. Dawson exhaled through his nose, looking up at me with the haunted eyes of a man who had just spoken to a Karen and lived to tell the tale. "It's happening again," he said, voice flat. I blinked. "What is?" He gestured toward a stack of papers on the table. I picked one up and immediately felt my blood pressure spike. HOA proposal. Closure of Ridgewood Elementary. Due to the school's declining enrollment and lack of necessity, the Ridgewood HOA proposes repurposing the land for a more community-friendly development. Translation: some rich HOA lunatic wants to shut down our school and turn it into overpriced condos. I dropped the paper like it was toxic. "You've got to be kidding me." Dawson just shook his head. "I wish." Now, I'd been a teacher at Ridgewood for 6 years, and while the pay wasn't great, and my classroom was held together by duct tape and prayers, I loved this place. The kids loved this place. And now, some clipboard-wielding psycho wanted to erase it because what? Schools weren't aesthetically pleasing enough for her HOA? Who's behind this? I asked, even though I already knew the answer deep down. Dawson sighed. "Who else?" "Marlene Devereaux." Marlene, queen of the HOA. The woman who once tried to ban Halloween decorations because pumpkins are a safety hazard. The woman who issued a noise complaint against a parade. The woman who, last Christmas, called the police on a group of carolers because unsanctioned singing wasn't in the HOA guidelines. And now she wanted to bulldoze a school. I stared at the proposal, my fingers twitching like they wanted to crumple it into a tiny, rage-filled ball. "On what planet is this a reasonable suggestion?" Dawson snorted. "Apparently, in the mind of Marlene and her goons. They claim enrollment's too low, and the land would be better used for a luxury community space." "Oh yeah," I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because the one thing this town desperately needs is more luxury condos." Dawson rubbed his face. "They're trying to push it through at the next HOA meeting. If they get enough support, they'll take it to the city council." I whistled low. "And if the council sides with them?" Dawson gave me a tired look. "Start packing up your classroom." "Like hell I would." I snatched the proposal off the table. "All right, screw this. Marlene wants a fight? Fine. She's gonna get one." Dawson looked at me warily. "What are you gonna do?" I grinned. "First, I'm going to remind the entire town why this school matters. And second," I tossed the proposal back onto the table with a smirk, "I'm gonna make sure Marlene Devereaux regrets ever learning how to write a proposal. Because if Marlene thought she could steamroll me, she was about to learn a very important lesson." Class was in session. If Marlene Devereaux wanted a war, I was more than happy to sharpen my number 2 pencils and bring out the big guns. Step 1. Figure out what nonsense she was spreading to justify this disaster. Luckily, I didn't have to wait long. By lunchtime, the gossip mill, otherwise known as PDA Moms in the pickup lane, was already running full speed. I overheard the first bit of insanity while grabbing my usual sad excuse for a salad in the cafeteria. Mrs. Hastings, the self-appointed queen of Facebook drama, was standing near the vending machine, whispering furiously to another parent. "She says the school's losing funding because of low enrollment," Hastings muttered, eyes darting around like she was spilling government secrets. "That the city's already considering shutting it down." "Oh really?" I smiled to myself and made a mental note. Marlene is fabricating financial doom. Classic move. 15 minutes later, while attempting to corral a group of 4th graders through recess, I caught wind of another one. "She told my husband it's unsafe," said Mrs. Patel, one of the newer parents. "That the building has foundation issues and mold." Mold? Mold. This building was barely 20 years old. Sure, the janitor's closet smelled like expired yogurt, but that was mostly because of Timmy from 2nd grade and his tendency to, accidentally, leave half-eaten snacks in places they absolutely did not belong. At this point, I was almost impressed by the level of BS Marlene was peddling. Almost. By the end of the day, The full extent of her misinformation campaign had been revealed. According to Marlene's version of reality, for the first, the school was practically abandoned. Tell that to my 28-student classroom. Secondly, it was a death trap that should be condemned. Someone should condemn her lack of a soul. Thirdly, the city was already considering alternative uses for the land. Read, her overpriced housing project. In other words, she was spinning a fairy tale so absurd that even the Grimm brothers would have told her to tone it down. I needed a plan. That evening, I holed up in my apartment, surrounded by a stack of school documents, enrollment reports, and enough coffee to keep me awake through the apocalypse. If Marlene wanted to throw fake numbers around, I was going to bury her in real ones. By midnight, I had everything I needed. First of all, actual enrollment numbers showing steady attendance. Secondly, a spotless safety inspection from just 4 months ago. Thirdly, a budget report proving the school was fully funded. And, my personal favorite, a little nugget of legal brilliance I stumbled across while digging through city zoning laws. See, Marlene thought she could waltz in, shut down the school, and turn it into her personal condo kingdom. What she didn't realize, the land was legally designated for educational use only, meaning, even if she convinced the HOA and the city council to back her nonsense, she'd still have to fight an uphill legal battle to get the land rezoned. Oh, Marlene, you really should have done your homework. The next morning, I stormed into Principal Dawson's office, slapped my folder of evidence onto his desk, and grinned. We're going to war. He blinked. That is a lot of paperwork. I nodded. And this, I pulled out the zoning law page like it was the Holy Grail, is our secret weapon. Dawson picked it up, skimmed it, and then, oh, would you look at that? A rare smile from our perpetually exhausted principal. Well, he muttered. She really didn't think this through, did she? I grinned. Not even a little, but I wasn't done. Facts were great, but this was Marlene we were dealing with. If I wanted to stop her, I had to do something more dramatic. I had to weaponize the town's outrage. Okay, I said, cracking my knuckles. Time to make sure every parent, teacher, and taxpayer in this town knows exactly what she's up to, because if Marlene wanted a public spectacle, I was going to give her one. Marlene Devereaux had made one fatal miscalculation. She forgot that people love a good scandal, especially when they feel personally attacked. And you know what feels deeply personal to a bunch of parents? Someone trying to bulldoze their kid's school. So I got to work. First, I took my stack of receipts, enrollment records, safety reports, and my personal favorite, that zoning law technicality, and crafted the most passive-aggressive yet airtight email of my career. Subject: so apparently our kids' education is unnecessary now? Body: dear Ridgewood families, as some of you may have heard, a certain HOA is pushing to shut down Ridgewood Elementary under the claim that our school is underfunded and unsafe. As a teacher here, I feel it's my responsibility to share the actual facts. Enrollment is stable. See attached records. The school passed all recent safety inspections. See attached reports. Funding is solid, and we are not at risk of closure. Financials attached. The land is legally designated for educational use, which means this proposal isn't just ridiculous, it's legally impossible without a lengthy rezoning battle. City zoning laws attached. If you'd like to express your opinion on this matter, the HOA meeting is this Thursday at 7 p.m. I'd hate for anyone to miss the chance to politely remind the HOA that our children's education isn't up for real estate speculation. Warmest regards, Alex Reed. P.S. If you're as frustrated as I am, feel free to share this with your friends and neighbors. Transparency is important. I hit send, and within minutes my phone started blowing up. Now, if you've never seen an angry group of PTA moms rally behind a cause, let me paint you a picture. Imagine a swarm of hornets with group chats and disposable income. By lunchtime, my email had spread like wildfire. Facebook was ablaze with furious parents, and someone's great-aunt had even printed flyers to hand out at the grocery store. By the time I left school that day, the receptionist was trying to keep up with dozens of phone calls from parents demanding to know why Marlene Devereaux thought she could play Monopoly with their children's education. Now that the town was sufficiently pissed off, it was time to confront the queen herself. I showed up at the HOA's pre-meeting cocktail hour. Yes, they had one, because nothing says, let's discuss community issues, like overpriced Chardonnay, and casually inserted myself into the conversation. Marlene was mid-sentence, explaining to some unfortunate soul how Ridgewood Elementary was, basically abandoned, when I decided to chime in. Oh wow, I said, smiling sweetly. That's so interesting. I must have imagined the hundreds of kids I see every day. Marlene stiffened. Excuse me? I pulled out my trusty folder and flipped to the enrollment numbers. You were saying something about declining attendance? I'd love to see your data because mine says we're just fine. Her smile tightened. Well, and unsafe buildings? I continued, flipping pages. That's weird because our safety inspection from this year gave us a clean bill of health. A few heads turned. Marlene's fake smile flickered. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off with my personal favorite. Oh, and the land use law? I feigned concern. Marlene, you read the zoning codes before proposing this, right? Dead silence. Marlene's wine glass trembled slightly in her hand. She knew she'd been caught, but she wasn't about to admit it. Not in front of her HOA minions. Well, she sniffed, trying to regain control. It's a discussion, not a decision. Of course, we'll hear from all parties. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Oh, don't worry, Marlene. I patted my folder. We definitely have some things to say. The HOA meeting was in 2 days. And when I tell you we were about to turn it into a full-blown revolution, I am not exaggerating. By the time Thursday night rolled around, the HOA meeting had officially become the event of the season. And not in a good way. People were pissed. The Ridgewood Community Center was packed. Parents, teachers, taxpayers, even some retirees who just wanted to watch the drama unfold. A few local reporters hovered near the back, cameras in hand. Someone's grandma was live-streaming the whole thing on Facebook. And right at the front, perched on her self-appointed throne, was Marlene Devereaux, looking like a woman who thought she had control of the room but was about to learn otherwise. I took a seat near the front, my folder of facts resting on my lap like a loaded weapon. Principal Dawson sat beside me, muttering, "This feels like the Salem witch trials." I grinned. Yeah. Except this time, we're burning her. The meeting kicked off with the usual HOA nonsense. Boring updates about landscaping regulations and some poor guy asking if he could finally paint his mailbox blue. He was denied, obviously. And then, finally, Marlene stood up, cleared her throat, and smiled the way someone does when they're about to say something deeply unhinged but with confidence. Friends, neighbors, she began, her voice dripping with faux concern. We're here tonight to discuss the future of Ridgewood Elementary. Someone booed. Loudly. Marlene's eye twitched. She powered through. As you all know, she continued, our community is changing. And as responsible homeowners, we must ask ourselves, is it really wise to continue investing in a school that is, she paused dramatically, underutilized, unsafe, and financially unsustainable? I saw Mrs. Patel physically clutch her pearls in offense. Marlene, mistaking the silence for agreement, smiled wider. We have an opportunity, she purred, to turn this underperforming institution into something that benefits everyone. Beautiful modern housing that will increase our property values and create a more sophisticated neighborhood. Oh no. She really said the quiet part out loud. The room erupted into chaos. What do you mean underperforming? Shouted one of the dads from the back. My kid loves that school. I work for the city. There are no funding issues. Are you seriously trying to get rid of a school for condos? Marlene held up a hand, as if she could physically will the crowd into submission. Now, let's keep this civil. That was my cue. I stood up, slowly, and walked to the microphone. Excuse me, Marlene, I said sweetly, but I have a few questions. She turned to me with a strained smile. Of course, that's what we're here for. I stepped forward, pulled out my folder of doom, and flipped it open with a dramatic flourish. First of all, I began, you mentioned declining enrollment. I held up the official numbers. Would you like to explain why our student population has remained consistent for the past 5 years? Marlene blinked. Well, I slapped the safety report onto the podium. And this whole unsafe claim? Funny, because here's the most recent building inspection from just a few months ago. 0 safety violations. Marlene's eye twitched. I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough to be menacing. And then there's this. I pulled out the final document, my personal favorite. The land use law. I turned to the crowd. In order for the school to be torn down, the city would have to approve a rezoning request, I explained. Which, for the record, is a years-long process that costs a fortune. And even then, there's no guarantee the city would approve it. I turned back to Marlene, watching the blood drain from her face. You knew this, didn't you? I asked, my voice all innocent. You just figured no one would check. Silence. Absolute, glorious silence. And then, just to drive the knife all the way in, Principal Dawson stood up. I called the city planning office this morning, he said casually. And they confirmed there's been no discussion of rezoning this land. The crowd exploded again, this time with laughter and outrage. Marlene's face twisted into something between fury and panic. Well, she sputtered, I was simply trying to start a conversation. No, Marlene, I cut in, smiling. You were trying to lie your way into a real estate deal. She turned bright red. I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice so only she could hear. Next time you try to destroy a school. Marlene, I whispered, do your homework first. The motion to close the school? Voted down unanimously. Marlene, publicly humiliated and metaphorically set on fire. By the time the meeting ended, she had slunk out of the building, her loyal minions scattering like cockroaches. And me? I went home, cracked open a celebratory drink, and basked in the warm glow of victory. Class dismissed.